Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's Board of Finance, public hearing of April 22nd, 2024. I'm Michael Anderson. I'm the chairman. And joining us are Dan Smith, vice chair. Carl Johnston, Gary Nino, Sarah Nelson. We have an alternate, Amy Friend. We have Lou Gingerella. Another alternate, Amy Burdine. We have Laura Brown, who's our finance administrator, and Mr. IT. What, Quinn? Quentin. The next item on the agenda is public comment. We'll be happy to hear public comment now. There will be another comment section after our presentations. But if anyone wants to get up and say something now, or we have anybody online, happy to. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. Page 1 is done. All right. Okay. As you know, I've been coming to a lot of the meetings, and one thing I'd like to do is I'd really like to commend the Board of Finance for the work they've been doing. I think you got the town headed in the right direction.
Thanks, Brian.
We're not really into that direction yet, though. On the selectmen's budget, I think they've also have done a great job for our town. They've always been asked to make cuts, and they've always done it. There's a few cuts I feel they could make. Maybe they can address it this year. Maybe they can address it in years to come. Particularly where I know I've said it a million times. I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it another million times. One would be where the affordable housing, they went down to $1, which I think is appropriate. The Conservation Commission, I think they could cut that back, because through the years that the Conservation Commission's been in effect, I've seen a lot of land that I feel shouldn't even be touched, but is being touched by humans, dogs, and everything else. I see our roads being used by, and I understand the reason they can use our roads for motorcycles. But I've seen an awful lot of them lately doing donuts in the middle of the roads, doing the wheelies, doing all that stuff. To me, that's not conservation. That conservation, when I was on it, was set aside land for the animals that are displaced by houses that are being built and people that are moving into town. Also to protect our natural aquifer. The other spot obviously is I didn't write it down. Okay. Well, anyways, to be the KNSA, they've been working. They got a house over in Clarks Falls, and I understand they got a couple down on I still call it Caswell Lane. I don't know what they call it now. And I'd like to see them do something with that before the town gives them any more money. They've been having their own fundraisers, and they cost the town some money, obviously on a previous deed. Now comes a tough one. I know some people don't think I like our school, but I love our school, believe it or not. But I don't know if they really look at their budget. Well, I know they look at their budget for the kids in the school, which is right. But they also, I feel they should look at what our town can afford. This is where I think they run short. When they're asked to cut, you very seldom see any teachers' positions consolidated or cut. One example I'll give you, and I gave it before, was when the state came up after the pandemic and the state paid for, I believe it was 2. I'm not even sure what they call them anymore because they got names for different ones in here and it confuses me. So anyways, the state paid for 2 years. I don't feel I should pay any more than that. The state said it was for every 250 kids, you're supposed to have one of these particular people. Well, in my thinking, is that for every 250 kids that are in school or 250 kids that need that help? And I'll give you an example of that. When I was much younger, my kids were in school. They evidently, they went to Wesley because I went through a divorce. And I got a call. And one of my kids was in a gifted class. Now, I'm not saying my kid's not smart. I knew he was smart, but I knew he wasn't gifted. So I called him out on it, as I usually do with stuff. And I went down and I talked to the person. She brought me into a closet. I said, what's going on here? She says, well, Mr. Rathman, this is what we got. We get a certain amount of money for having a certain amount of kids in this program. And we were short, so we put your son in it. I says, and you're not doing my son a favor. What's he going to do when he finds out he's not gifted? You're doing that just so you can get your money? Those are the things to me are sneaking and wrong. I'm not saying our school does that, but I could see where it would be very tempting. It's not fun. It's not fun to be laid off. I told you before I was laid off and I survived. I'm still here today. I think we have, let's see, what was it? Oh, 69 regular teachers. And I added up, I took out, or I tried to anyways, the people that I felt didn't, and don't take offense if you're one of these people that I don't consider direct with the kids, because I'm sure you're all directly with the kids in the school. But I feel this way. I counted up, I said, okay, they got a total of 144.1 person for staffing. So I took out some and I came up with 110.1. Now I think we got around 750 kids in our school, might be a little more. Well, let's use that as an example. So if you divide that, that means each one, that's 5.20 kids per each staff. Are we running a public school or a private school? When I looked up price per student, and I'll have to go back and get the site, I should have wrote it down, but it said it costs us $27,450 to educate each child. That's a lot. I don't know if our town or the townspeople really can afford that kind of money. And if we get maybe, 40 or 50 more kids, are we going to have to build another school? Definitely can't afford that. They have, I was told they had 4 secretaries, but when I went through the budget here, item 2930, let's see, 29, no, excuse me, 30, 31, and 32. I count 12 secretaries there. 6, 5, and 1. That's 12 to me, not 4. I had a person write to me because she knew I'd speak. And she mentioned we're spending over $110,000 in athletic extra duty stipend salaries. a new full-time athletic director, and a new physical education teacher are proposed. The athletic director position, an additional step in. Why? Isn't that part of the job? Sports transportation, $76,050, and diesel fuel, another $98,000. The sports that our school does not offer, and the kids go to other schools, that should be the parents bringing them there. We shouldn't have to pay for that. Taxpayer in North Snowington shouldn't have to pay for that. We should only pay for the sports that are offered in our school. So my suggestions would be this, and I know we can only vote on the overall budget of the school. But I would suggest, instead of adding more school staff, reevaluate what the North Snowington teachers do. Consolidate if they can. Because every teacher that added, yeah, we might see a figure on his paper. But we don't see the benefit figure, which benefits add up to quite a lot. And I think that's what we really got to look at, the whole picture. I think there ought to be a requirement that the people that are hired in our school system live in our town. So they will be contributing to our tax base and understand what it is to live in North Snowington, to make the sacrifices we all have to make. I also like them to consider, to look and see if they can find out, which I'm sure they can, what the tax base in North Snowington is for the people that live here. And make it appropriate for their budget, the school budget, of what a taxpayer can afford. You know, money doesn't grow on trees, even though we got a lot in North Snowington. Every year I got to go through my budget, and the first thing I go through is the highest amount of my budget. And the school budget is the highest amount of our taxpayers. So I'd like you, Board of Finance, to take consideration. I'm just thinking some of my comments, and hopefully you'll maybe even revise the budget a little more. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm gonna have to impose a time limit now for comments, but always appreciate your comments, Brian. Anybody else before we have the presentations? Ann? Sit right there, Ann.
Hi, Ann Norwalk from Northwest Corner Road. Just a couple of things, not for this year's budget, and thank you all for working so hard to crunch it as best you could. Two things I was thinking of to get on the list for maybe next year is painting the Dean Gallup house and the Hewitt Farm, because it's going to need it, and pretty soon it's going to have holes that are going to need, it needs more repairs. So I think that should get on the list of things to do in the early, soon future. The other one is what's going to happen to that house that's over by the pond? Is that going to get used for anything? If it's not recoverable, it should probably be torn down. Or is there any chance it could be used for affordable housing, like with the group we have in town, or with Habitat for Humanity or something like that? It's not a bad place to live. It wouldn't bother the people that are that come hiking there, and it wouldn't bother the people in the house to have the hikers come and park where they do. So that's all for future things.
Okay,
Not this year. Thank you.
thanks, Ann. Anybody else? Anyone online? We do have public comments after the presentations too, so. Hearing none, we're gonna go start with our presentations. I'm gonna, I'll have my own presentation, but it'll be after these presentations. We're gonna start with, Bob Carlson with the Board of Selectmen governmental budget and capital and debt.
All right, thank you. So as Mike said, I'm Bob Carlson. I'm the first selectman. So I'm responsible for 3 of these handouts that you have. One that looks like this is the actually presentation I'm going to be using this evening. There's a summary review that you can look at if you forgot what I said later, because it just summarizes it all. And then there's the actual budget. My budget and the Board of Ed budget's attached to this. I'm just going to start with this for a second and let you know that this budget was printed a few days ago, and this is my 11th budget season. It's 4 with the Board of Ed, and this is the 7th as a selectman. First time I've had to put one together by myself because we didn't have an admin finance director for a few months. And as we scurried around on Friday, myself and Laura Brown, the new admin finance director. Can I shut this off? Can you? Is this one okay? Okay. So as we scurried around Friday and Mike Anderson, the chair, was trying to get information and we're trying to get it over to him, he pointed out something. He said, Bob, I think that there's an error in the revenue side on the collection of taxes. And as I looked at it, I said, Mike, I think you're right. We put in the collection of taxes at 100% in the revenue side. And we know that I don't think in the history of North Stonington or any town you've ever collected taxes at 100%. So, and once we see something or hear something, we can't unsee it. We can't unhear it. We can't ignore it. So we had to do something about it. And Mike said, yeah, I think I need to call a special Board of Finance meeting to talk to my board and see how we best handle this. It was a mistake when I put it in. I put it in at 100% because that's how the math worked. And when he pointed out, I realized that in the past budgets that we only put it in at either 98 or 98.5%. And we've got a great tax collector, but I wouldn't want to put her under that pressure to think she has to collect every dollar of every tax that's due. She does a phenomenal job. She'll probably collect 98.5% this year. And she's actually, and you'll see in my presentation, she's already collected over 217,000 additional to what was budgeted on back taxes. So she's doing a phenomenal job, but I can't expect her to collect 100%. So we had to make a change and we had to reduce the revenue. And you'll see it in my presentation and in the summary sheet, but you won't see it in the budget because we hadn't had a chance to change it in the budget. However, it will be changed in time for the town meeting. But the Board of Finance, Mike and the Board of Finance will address how they're going to fill that gap with that additional revenue that's not that wasn't considered. So going forward, I'm going to present what I have with the changes I've made, and then the Board of Ed will present, and after the Board of Ed presents, the Board of Finance will wrap it up with how they want to move forward. I think you'll find in general, I think the Board of Finance wants to do its best for the taxpayer. We have a good budget. Luckily for us, we didn't have a bad budget that just got worse. We had a great budget that maybe isn't quite as great as it used to be. This was one of the smoothest budget processes I've ever been through until Friday, and then it changed. But it's still not bad. So I have these 3 documents. We're going to work on the Board of Selectmen budget presentation. This one, and Noah Walker already gave me a hard time about how many trees were cut down for these 3 documents, and I apologize. We only cut dead and diseased trees down for these. So start with the budget summary. You're turning the page. You want me to like say beep or something? Beep. Okay, turn the page. And so this is also the first page in our budget. And what this shows you is what the actual spending was 3 years ago, what the approved budget was last year, and what the proposed budget is this year. And we have a proposed budget with a budget increase, total budget increase, which includes Board of Ed, government, education, and capital, debt and capital, $736,498, which is a 3.27% increase. Beep. Just turn it. Thanks. So let's start with some good news, because I've noticed the Board of Ed does this and it works pretty well. So we'll try it on our end. So good news. We had an increase in revenue this year. Estimated revenue increase is $639,107, which includes the general property tax estimated at 98.5, not at 100%. Next slide. More good news. So we knew we built schools, and we heard it was going to take anywhere from 2 to 5 to 8 years to get our money back on the final reimbursement. Well, guess what? We had an audit. We got our money back. We got it back a few weeks ago. So we put $1,183,606 back in the undesignated fund. When that check has come back and it's already in the fund. Past due tax collection, as I mentioned, we have a phenomenal tax collector. She budgeted $100,000 in collecting of back taxes. She's already collected $317,203. The difference being we netted a positive $217,203 in back taxes. One thing about back taxes is once you collect them all, there's no more to collect. So this number won't hopefully and probably won't be this high next year. For those that don't know, we're having a tax sale on past due properties. And that's, I don't know what we're going to make on that. We want to make sure we pay lawyers' fees, probably get some money on back taxes. The idea is to get these pieces of property on tax rolls. So in the future, we're not sending out tax bills and getting no response. There's 12, I think there's 11 or 12 properties that the tax sale is on Friday. Again, we haven't done one of these in over 20 years, I believe. You know, Bill, Nick, when's the last time we did a tax sale? Over 20 years, I hope, correct? So it's something that our tax collector wanted to do. Why not get more money into the coffers? And so we're going to try it on Friday, and hopefully we won't do another one for another 20 years. Next page. So every year, the Board of Selectmen sets some goals with budgets. And one of the things we did last year is how do we limit appropriations after the budget process? Because if it's not in the budget, then it's not really fair to go back to the taxpayer and ask for things that we didn't budget for. So we try to limit it. We had some success doing this last year. Good news is a lot of the money that we budgeted, we asked for, we're getting back. But the town agreed to do $190,000 to buy a truck and compactors for the transfer station. We're making big changes up there. We're getting killed on transportation fees. So we're going to decide we're going to transport our own trash and recyclables, which will save the town a lot of money over the course of time. We already budgeted a saving of $35,000 for next year. We're also working with Preston. They want to hire us to do some transporting for them. I said it would only work if it's good for Preston, but it also has to be good for North Stonington. So we will not only, it'll help us pay for our equipment, but we'll make some profit on it also. So we're going to be working hand in hand with Preston, but we'll own the trucks, we'll own the canisters, and I think that would be good both for the town and for Preston, as long as it works for both of us. STEEP grant is something that we got awarded. STEEP stands for a Small Town Economic Assistance Program. And when we able to do things, this is $426,153 that we asked the Board of Finance for in the town, and the town approved. We get 80% of that back, but we're also getting $426,000 of work done, which we're only paying 20% for that. LOSUP money is used usually for town projects and roads. We get 100% of that back. So we asked for $59,816, and we'll get all that back. The last thing, which is probably a bone of contention for some people, but we bought a ladder truck for $50,000, and that was at a town meeting, and it was approved. So we did have probably more appropriations than we had hoped, but luckily for us, in some cases, we're getting most of that money back. Next slide. So we also had budget goals when it came to this building. Nice thing is we were able to complete the demolition using the ARPA funds without adding any more money from the taxpayer, and that was successfully done. The fund operating expense at $85,000 was more than enough money to support this building, so that was a success. And we started to produce revenue from the Early Learning Center, which is the group that has the two-story wing, which used to be the high school. She has the first floor now, and she's looking to move into the second floor very shortly, which will give us additional revenue. So far, this building has been a success for the town. Next goal, next slide, set of goals. So we try not to use the undesignated fund to balance the budget. If you looked at one of our neighboring towns south of here that begins with an S, they put over $3 million out of the undesignated fund to balance their budget. So we did 440,000 back in 2020 and 21, 194,000 in 21, 22. And for the last 2 years, we were able to do it with zero. This year, well, because of what happened on Friday, and we'll talk about this, the Board of Finance will talk about this in a little while, the amount will be determined. It wasn't determined at the time of me doing this slide, so, but we'll hear more about that in a little while. Last, we wanted to address the transfer station rising cost. We found that we did that successfully. We did transfer station stickers, which would raise $25,000 per year. Bulky waste fees, roughly $10,000. Bottom bill proceeds we put towards the renovation, which is $15,000 roughly per year. And we saved $35,000 on contractual fees, which is the people who haul our trash and our recyclables. Now that we're doing it ourselves, we can save that money rather than paying exorbitant amounts of money to do that. Turn the page. So now let's talk about the budget. If you look at the line items, so what I did, anything that was more than $1,000 positive or negative, I put in, it's a positive or negative change of $1,000 plus. The Board of Selectmen was an increase of, that budget is an increase of 11,233. That's mostly salaries due to that increase. Probate court was a decrease of 1,069. Board of Finance, that increase of 1130 is due to, we have to sign up and rehire our auditor who did a fantastic job last year. Like the price goes up and the price is going up next year. So there's an increase there. The tax assessor, that's mostly salaries and expenses. We're going to be doing in 2025, there'll be another reval. It's the midterm reval, the one we did in 2020. There'll be another one after that in 2030. Tax collector is salaries and expenses of 2375 increase. Town attorney, we decreased by $5,000 because the Board of Selectmen have decided we're trying to do things without always calling the town attorney every time we want an answer to something, and we feel we can save some money that by doing that. And I don't think I've spoke to Rob Avina more than once in the last 3 or 4 months. Annexation. So we have an ordinance that says that we have to, as a town, try to prevent annexation when it comes to tribal affairs. There's been some activity lately after 3 or 4 years of quiet, nowhere near what Mr. Mullane had to deal with back 20 years ago. But because there's activity going on, we felt we have to raise this amount of money from 5,000 to 10,000. Unfortunately, this may also be an appropriation coming down the road for past lawyers' bills as we're trying to fight this annexation coming forward. Economic development is a decrease because we've decided to take away the position of the coordinator's position. Rec commission is also a decrease of $1,609. Fixed charges, there's an increase of $113,606. Now, this is by far the biggest increase in the budget, but $112,796 that is medical insurance. Election and town meetings have been increased by $5,230, but that's mostly because of early voting. We have to have people here more often. Early voting starts, and actually the one that's coming up in November starts 14 days in advance of the election. Town hall expenses, we decreased the 298 building number from 85,000 to 80,000. So that's most of the savings we have there. Social services and welfare, there's a small increase of 1,058. Most of that went to the Pawcatuck Neighborhood Center. Information technology, an increase of 9,031, and that's mostly because of cybersecurity. Unfortunately, as we know more and more, there's a threat to towns in businesses when it comes to cybersecurity, and we have to make sure we're protected. Public safety, 88,448. The two big things there is a $25,000 increase to the ambulance association and the per diem firefighter that we had that the opera funds were paying for the first 3 years has run out. We have two full-time firefighter positions, per diem positions. And the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen felt going forward that you need two people there during the day. It's not so bad at nighttime when you have all the volunteers at home from work, but during the day when they're working, it's tough to get people to drive the trucks, and we need at least two people at the station. Public Works Department is an increase of 13,311, which is mostly wages and tipping fees, which is part of the transporting of recyclables. Land use is increase of 5,933, which is mostly wages. And the grand total increase for the Board of Selectmen, all departments, is $242,648. So that's the government budget. There's also a capital budget, which is was part of the first page we looked at. In the capital goals, the Board of Finance asked the Board of Selectmen to lock into a capital budget early in the budget process and not use cuts to the capital expenditures to lower the budget as has been done in the past. So we have in capital this year, there's five pieces of equipment actually move this needle quite a bit. There's a 2024 loader. There's a lift truck. There's a 10-wheel plow truck. There's the second payment to a North Stonington Volunteer Fire Company service truck, and there's a new ambulance in this budget. So with that large increase in capital, you're going to see that we still kept the budget fairly reasonable, but those pieces of equipment, those first three I mentioned, we decided that we're going to finance those rather than save for those. And people say, well, why wouldn't we save? It makes more sense. And I'm going to tell you why it didn't make sense. So let's say the piece of equipment costs $225,000. The finance charge, if we save, is zero because we're saving. Inflation on that vehicle over 3 years is roughly $25,000. If we save and then we buy it later, the expense to keep this vehicle on the road, so the maintenance on this vehicle averages out to $13,258, and we did that by looking at all our vehicles at Town Hall that were over 5 years old, and what does it cost to keep them on the road? The resale value. So we buy this new vehicle that we get in, say, 4 years, and we sell the one we had at $15,000. So we wait 4 years for it, and we pay $248,258 when it's all said and done, counting the inflation and what it costs to keep it on the road for 4 years. So if we finance it, same truck, $225,000, the finance charge is $23,716. So already we're off to a bad start. However, there's no inflation because we just bought it. We're not going to buy it 4 years from now. The maintenance is strictly oil changes and minimum maintenance to keep it on the road, which is $1,000. The resale value is probably higher. So we estimate it's $20,000 because we're going to sell it now versus 4 years from now. We don't have to wait 4 years. We can put the truck in the taxpayer dollars for the truck to use now rather than ask taxpayers for money for us to hold. So in 4 years, we can buy a truck. This way we're taking the taxpayer dollars and buying the truck immediately. And the net on it is $229,716. So basically we're saving about $20,000 by financing it. And that's why the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen decided this might be the route to go this time. We also put together a capital committee made up of 3 members of the Board of Finance, myself, and 2 members of the Board of Ed to look at capital going forward. We have a history of cutting capital out of our budget to lower the budget, and we decided that we can't keep doing that. So this capital committee has already met 3 or 4 times. We have a meeting again, I think, in a couple of weeks. Gary Anino from the Board of Finance is the chairman of it. Lou Gingerella is on it, and so is Sarah Nelson from the Board of Finance. We hope to report back to the town in September to determine what is the best way to move forward with capital. So that's the budget, but there's one more thing I want to talk to you about as we're trying to be totally transparent. You might have heard through the grapevine that the Wheel Library is going to be looking for some money coming forward down the road, probably towards the end of summer, early fall. They've already come to the Board of Selectmen, and they've told us that they're looking for about $2 million to work on a project that's about a $4 million project, where they will put forth $2 million on their own, and the town would support them by giving them another $2 million. Again, this is going to be happening more towards September, October, but we felt remiss if we didn't tell you this was down the pike. And you said to me, well, gee, if I knew this, I would have maybe looked at the budget differently. So the budget's the budget, and then they're two separate things, but we have to let you know this is coming down the road later on. But what has to happen with this is the Board of Selectmen have to, and we have not voted yet, we have to vote to move it forward. If we vote to move it forward, we move it forward to the Board of Finance, who then votes to move it forward again back to the Board of Selectmen to hold a series of probably at least 2 public hearings. And then the Board of Selectmen would then, after the public hearing, send it to a town meeting and eventually to a referendum. When you're talking about $2 million, I think that you should have as many people weigh in as possible. So there is a process. This isn't just going to be something that the Board of Selectmen say, okay, let's move forward, send it to referendum. It's going to go through a number of steps to get there, including at least 2 public hearings. So if this request passes through all approvals, the Board of Selectmen will also provide our residents with a capital outlook plan for the next 10 years. If this is $2 million that we're asked for, and so let's say we take a bond or we take a note for 10 years, we'll let you know how that's going to affect the taxpayer. But we also have to let you know what else is coming down the pike for the taxpayer over those same 10 years. If the library is asking for $2 million, but we can see $8.5, $9 million of capital coming our way over the next 10 years, we have to let you know that. So I don't want you voting for or against something without knowing the entire picture. So I promise you, when we get to public hearings, you'll hear the complete presentation by the library and all the reasons why this is a good idea and I'm not saying it's not, but then the Board of Selectmen will also let you know what else you can expect to see coming over those same 10 years. What do we need as far as emergency service trucks? What do we need as far as plows? What do we need as far as, building repairs, capital? So we promise you that we will do that for you. Again, this has nothing to do with today's budget, but both the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen agreed that we can't do our budget season without at least mentioning this is coming up sometime in the near future, probably in September, October. And that's all I have. Thank you. And
Thank
do
you,
you
Bob.
want to ask questions, or you can do it during public hearing, or how do you want to do it? Public meeting, rather, public comment.
Well, the agenda has the comments afterwards, so I would imagine if there's a question that anyone wants at the appropriate time, then you and Steph would just have to kind of like go back and forth and address
Okay,
everything.
fair enough. Thank you.
So Steph? We have Stephanie Mastriani. She is the Chair of the Board of Education.
Oh, so. Off now, okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Stephanie Mastriani. I'm the Chair of the Board of Education, and I'm here to present our 24-25 budget for you. Oh, sure. Is that better? I'm going to use this one. I'm using this one. Okay. So in thinking about our budget this year, I don't have anything really remarkable to ask you for. Last year, we talked about a lot of gaps that we had coming out of COVID. We talked about needing an alternative education program. We wanted to reopen our wood shop. We discussed the need for additional mental health services for our students. We were really understaffed in that department. And we were able to do all of those things, and we've seen some really great results. I took out all of my good news slides, and now I'm sad because Bob put good news slides in his, but I wanted to make this presentation short for you. So if you want to see all those good news slides and understand a little bit more about the impact that those programs had over the last year, you can go to the school's website. You can look back at how we built this budget, and you can also see the longer version of my presentation tonight given by our superintendent, and all of those good news slides will be in there for you. Additionally, if you grabbed a budget packet, there's a pretty significant narrative that goes along with the budget, and some of that information's in there as well. So this year, I think the most remarkable thing about our education budget is that for the first time in a really long time, we have funded every line item that we need to fund in order to run a school district. In the past, we used to zero out our supply line to get our budget lower, and then we'd have to rush at the end of the year to use those end of the year funds to pre-buy all of our supplies so that we could have supplies to run our school. Last year, we backed out all of our technology money and bought that technology that we needed for our school through our non-lapsing account. This year, we've successfully added back all of those things. And so what you see in front of you tonight is a full budget. It's funded the way that a school needs to fund a budget in order for it to run. And so I'm thrilled to see a really authentic budget. Next slide, please. Up here is simply our mission and the vision that we have for our schools. And I think it's really powerful and speaks a lot to the staff that we have at our school and what we want graduates of Wheeler to look like. Next slide, please. So this is just some basic information about our enrollments. These are questions that come up a lot. Brian Rathman at the beginning talked about 750 students. Brian, you were really, really close. So that's a picture of who we have coming to Wheeler right now. Between 7th and 12th grade, we have 346 students, and that does include our 22 tuitioning in students. We are a school of choice now and have been for a few years for Preston and Voluntown. I'll speak a little bit about that later. At our elementary school, we have 402 students. And then this question came up this year, and we thought it might be useful to put it on the slide. We also have students that go somewhere other than Wheeler. So if students choose to get an education outside of Wheeler at any of these schools, we as a district are required to support them. So we don't have an opportunity not to fund that education. We're required to do so. Right now, we have 10 students attending the various magnet schools in this area. We do pay that tuition. We do not pay for transportation to magnet schools. For the VOAG program at Ledyard, we do pay the tuition. We have 4 students there. And for the vocational tech schools, we don't have to pay that tuition. We have 24 students enrolled there. In 2022, we set out to create 3 goals for the next 3 years that really define what it is that we want our schools to look like. These goals, some people I think would say that they're sick of hearing them because we talk about them all the time. These goals are embedded in everything that we do and everything that we spend. So you'll notice through the budget that there'll be places where you'll see the goal attached to them. So every expenditure needs to be attached to one of these goals. Our superintendent reports at every Board of Education meeting during his report on these goals. And it really helps to keep the district focused about what our vision is. Next slide, please. This year, we have some pretty basic budget drivers. Obviously, the biggest one are our employment contracts. Next year, we'll be going into year 2 of the teacher's contract, year 1 of our administrator's contract, our paraprofessional and custodian contract will be at year 2, secretary year 3. We also saw a 5.08% health insurance increase. And then these next 3 are the 3 that are flexible and that we control. So innovative instruction is something that we started talking about last year and really started investing in. We gave a stipend for a staff member to be an innovative instructive leader and to start working with other teachers, to start writing curriculum. And it was a huge success. There's a slide on that we'll get to a little bit further, but we've decided that we want to invest further in that. Our athletic director, after many, many years, Ellen Turner, our athletic director, is retiring. And so we were faced with trying to replace Ellen in some way. And when you look at someone in a position that's been in place for so long and held by the same person, you start to wonder, how are you going to replicate that? And in so many ways, it's impossible. I think Mrs. Costanza was here a little while ago, and we ran into the same problem at her retirement after many years being our school social worker. It's really impossible. And so we had to look at the athletic director position and think about what that looks like for us today. What do we need? What are the things that we really have to focus on? And then the last budget driver is our technology piece. I spoke earlier about how committed we were to funding technology because you have to have technology to run a school. And so we took a look at what we needed to fund our technology, and then took a look at a way to do it better than maybe how we originally looked at it. Next slide, please. So innovative instruction. And so this was the first of those flexible drivers that we're talking about. So you could see on the left-hand side of the screen, there are some quotes from staff members that have been working with this particular innovative instructive director. She has really made a difference. And not only is she writing curriculum, but she's providing in-house professional development, which means that we're not sending teachers out to different places. She's providing that professional development right here in our school. It means that it's targeted, it's cohesive, and teachers are not only being instructed and getting this professional development, but they're being supported in their delivery in the classroom, which is so important because it's great to go learn something new, but if you don't have the support to implement that in your classroom, it's sort of useless. So this has been really wonderful. I think that it not only is bringing some real cohesion to what we're doing, both at the elementary school and at the middle high school, but it also, I believe at some point, we'll see a financial benefit by not having to outsource all of our professional development. Next slide, please. So our athletic director and Brian Rathbun in his comments earlier sort of alluded to the fact that we were hiring an additional PE teacher, and that is all true. As we started to look at what we needed in an athletic director, we thought that we weren't sure that we could get all of that, everything that we needed out of an athletic director who is also being a full-time teacher. So we did recently make a hire for an athletic director, and that person will have the ability to teach. So if we need to call on that person to teach, they're absolutely able to do that. But we did have to hire an additional PE teacher to replace those classes that were being taught by our current athletic director. When we looked at the job summary, we thought about things that we really need out of a new athletic director. And if we freed up some time because that director is no longer teaching, what do we want? So our middle school sports need a bit of fine tuning. And so we're looking to that athletic director to really take a critical look at that and give us some direction about what we should do. It may very well be to develop an intramural program so that all interested students are able to get experience in the sports that they want to get. Additionally, create a unified sports program and some opportunities there. When we were thinking about what we needed for technology, we were going to have to replace desktops, provide new laptops, replace classroom printers. And so we, in the future, we're also looking at our server storage and how expensive it is to replace servers. What we've now decided to do is to phase out desktop computers completely. Now teachers will only have laptops instead of having a laptop and a desktop. We're phasing out classroom printers, and we're going to transition to cloud storage instead of holding it on servers. This, you could see the cost savings here from our original plan. Next slide, please. We realized some significant savings in special education this year. We are able to welcome some students back from outplacements. Special education outplacements are very, very expensive, and we have been able to create programs here that allow some of those outplacements to come back. And so you see that up here with the tuition for outplacements, we're going to be saving $200,000, contracted services and transportation for a gross savings of $388,000. What we are proposing to do is hire a board certified behavioral analyst, and the next line are RBTs. They're registered behavior technicians. We currently have that in our school. We're contracting out for those services. By hiring them on our own, not only will we save a little bit of money, but we're also going to guarantee that we're getting the same people in our school every day, that we have those people. Now we have to call, they have to send us who they have. It's not terribly consistent. And so this is going to allow us to have those services that we're providing already right here in our school. And so with the costs of that, our net savings from special education will be $276,000. One of the other things that we work really hard to do is to always evaluate what's happening in our schools. What are the needs of our students, and where are the best places to send our resources? This year, when thinking about our special education needs, there was a great deal of scrutiny that went into what are we doing with paraprofessionals, and are they where they need to be to get or to have the most impact? So we are going to be using these registered behavioral technicians, give them a bit of extra training. They'll get a stipend, and then they'll have a certification. And so paras will be able to take this on. We also looked at the early childhood paraprofessionals, and that's how they're going to be sort of put into our classrooms. So 2 paras in pre-K and K, 3 in kindergarten. And then of course there are students that have one-to-one paras, and that will continue. You also heard Brian earlier refer to our ESSER grant. So that is the COVID money that we were receiving. And Brian is absolutely right. That money has expired. And we had to take a hard look at what we were going to do. We had these positions. The ESSER grant was not, however, attached to this specific services or 250 students per position. We were able to use that ESSER grant to determine or to put into places where we determined there was a need. There were some gaps in math and reading after COVID, and so we were able to pull in some interventionists. Our scores are looking better. We also had some additional paraprofessionals. So what we had to do and where those positions went, in a way to be fully transparent to you all. So the 3 paras were moved to an IDEA grant, and we were able to do that because of the lower tuition for the special education students. Our elementary school math interventionist is being funded through our Board of Education budget. So you're going to see that in the budget. There's a 0.5 reading interventionist at the elementary school. That was moved into the Right to Read grant. This was a grant that we had to apply for. We actually had to send staff to be trained. But we do feel it's important to go after those grants that are available to us. And so we did it, and we're able to use that money that way. And then our 0.25 literacy teacher, you're also going to see in our Board of Education budget. When looking at the services and the results that we were getting from these services, it made sense to keep them. We are making these decisions in a data-driven way. So I don't want anyone to think that it's because someone was hired that they'll stay in that position forever, and that's the way it is. We do evaluate it, and when we evaluated it, this was what we determined was the best thing to do. Here are the numbers for you to see in those areas of significant increases. The regular education teacher salaries, an increase of about $216,000. And those are the contractual increases, the additional PE teacher, the 0.6 social studies teacher. So that social studies teacher, that 0.6 is going to take the place to free up time for that innovative instruction director to be able to be more engaged in that work. Central office salaries, you're going to see a pretty significant increase there. And that's because that BCBA, that brand new position, that's where that position lives. Paraprofessional salaries, we gave our paraprofessionals a much needed salary increase last year. And then you're also going to see the impact of the expiration of the ESSER grant there. Medical insurance, that's the 5.08% increase that I talked about earlier. And then our technology, and you'll see it's a 58,500 amount, and also that much of an increase because that was 0 last year in our budget. So it's a 100% increase because we didn't fund it last year. In terms of revenue, the ECS money that we get from the state comes directly to the town, so that's about $2.5 million. And then our school of choice tuition, that's what I was speaking about earlier. Those are the students from Preston and Voluntown that can elect to come to our school and pay the town for the option of doing that. So in 2024, so this year, we're going to have our first cohort graduating. So that's the first group of kids that came in. Next year will be the first year that we have students across every grade because our program has been in existence that long. So this is the amount that we are projecting to bring in next year through that program. We have worked really hard to collaborate with the town wherever we can, and we are so lucky that Town Hall and the Board of Selectmen have been so willing to engage with us. We've had 2 incredible opportunities for STEEP grants where we've been able to work with the Board of Selectmen to put Board of Education projects in STEEP grants so that we're paying for projects that need to be done, but we're paying for them at 20% of the cost, which has really been just huge for us and what we've been able to do. So we were able to do the blacktop last year, and the irrigation is coming up this year. I don't know if anybody noticed, but the traffic signs on Route 2 had stopped blinking when school was in session. And that meant that the speed limit changed down to 25 wasn't enforceable. So we were able to work together actually with the Board of Finance as well. We worked very quickly to fix those traffic signs, and now they're up and running again. Bob mentioned that capital working group, and you can read the other collaborative efforts. Next slide, please. The other piece that I think it's important to talk about is our non-lapsing account. This is a relatively new account we've been talking about for maybe 3 years now. And we wanted to demonstrate the purchases that we've been able to make through our non-lapsing account. So this account acts like a savings account. So it rolls year after year and has helped us to be able to plan out our larger one-time purchases rather than having to scramble at the end of the year before that money goes back. So we're able to put up to 2% of our Board of Education budget back into this non-lapsing account when we have end of the year unspent funds. Not only does it allow us to make these purchases, but it allows us to not add them into the Board of Education budget and not grow that line, that bottom line, for these one-time purchases. It's been it's been incredibly helpful in our long-range planning. Just to give you an idea of what a deposit into this account looks like, the fiscal year 23 deposit was $49,145,000. And just for a historical look back, these are the last 10 years of Board of Education budgets. This year, we're asking for 1.79% of an increase, with the average increase over the last 10 years being 1.95. And that concludes my budget presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Red. Those that didn't know me, I'm Mike Anderson. I live at 83 Cedars Road up near Billings Lake. And this is my second go around with the Board of Finance. I was at 6 years already. Dan Spring was chairman when I first got on. Carolyn was there. And then I was the vice chair under Paul Simons. Paul decided not to go on, do this again. I decided I'd like to torture. And I became the chairman in November. And so I have some slides, just trying to take you through the process, kind of some of the highlights. I might skip over any of the details because they've already been provided by either Bob or Stephanie. Next slide. Obviously, when we're talking as a board, we have to worry about what the economy and the inflationary pressures that we all feel. There's always contractual obligations that are right up there that cause these budgets to these needs to increase. It's just the nature of unionized work and the contracts that we have. As Bob alluded to, we after last year, last budget season in the summer, we started discussing capital. This is my seventh time, and we've always cut capital to balance the budget, and we got to stop doing that. So we asked the Board of Selectmen to come up with a comprehensive capital plan, at least for this year, that we could get behind and not touch, and have the town governmental side and the Board of Education know that this is not on the chopping block. They actually came up with a pretty good 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, and 20-year capital plan. But that's still in flux. And as Bob said, we have a capital committee with Gary Anino chairing, and we have 3 members of our board, Bob, and 2 members of the Board of Education on that board, to really look at capital in all areas to come up with a comprehensive plan going forward. And so we're hoping to have that for next year. But they did come up with a great plan for this year, which is in this budget. Obviously, we need to cover our operational needs in schools and town. And go back one slide, please. An important part of this discussion tonight is managing our undesignated fund in a fiscally responsible way. And I'll get more into that after we go through everything, and obviously try to get a balanced budget. So this on your budget packages, you've seen this with Bob's presentation, but the change in the ask is 498, sorry. Next slide. So we met with Daryl Del Grosso, who's our assessor, and our grand list has increased 16,630,822 over last year. It's a 2.74 increase. I think it's fantastic news for our town. 2.7, personal property, particularly the solar farms, were the primary grower of that. So that was by 13,504,127. Real estate increased 5.7 million. And you'll all be happy to know that motor vehicles finally have gone down in value. They're more in normal range. Right after COVID, it was crazy and we all got charged a lot for our cars, but that's more normal now. So we have a mill rate right now of 28.99. And if we used 100% tax collection rate, which is what the budget originally that came to us came with, and you'll see it in the budgets that you have, the amount is 18 million and change. But at 98.5, the numbers actually should be 17,788, 888.95. That's line A100 in your budgets. Other highlight, Sean Murphy, our treasurer, for money that we have in projects, saved for projects now, he started, we're using short-term investments and we're adding $80,000 to revenue. Right, it's up 10 from last year. We had 60 last year and 80 this year. We have other revenue sources. So the available revenue, in reality, with the 98.5% is 23,158,665.46. As Bob said, at 639,106.46. You'll see in your printed budgets, it's 910,002.51, but then that was again at the 100% tax collection rate. So means we have 639,106.46 that was available for us for new expenditures to maintain the town and to take care of any of these contractual increases and new capital. Our budget process, I'm going to try to fly through this a little bit. Again, capital plan, we asked them for the capital plan. They gave that to us in January. We met with the various departments from the town government in February. They combine the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance meet together with those departments. Then the Board of Selectmen go back and they create their budget. The Board of Finance presents their budget to us. That was done in March. And with both the budgets submitted, the first go around even at the 100% tax rate, it was a deficit of just under 82,000. That was the first go around. So we asked the Board of Education to make a bottom line adjustment of that 82,000. And we also suggested to the Board of Selectmen that they review their overtime budget line item. That was all done in March. The drafts came back and we decided to send that draft to the town hearing for today. That's what you see here. And we're going to take your comments obviously after this to decide whether are we going to change the budget or are we going to do anything. Next slide. So when that first budget came around from the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen had an increase of 482,414 over last year. Again, it was operational expenses of 259,398. Capital increase 223,016. Debt was no increase, it was the same. Board of Education had an original ask of 509,344, which was 3.36%. And again, special education, new positions, contractual salary increases, and expiring grants were the primary driver for that increase. So the original request for new spending was 991, 757, 66. We thought we had $910,002.51 in surplus. So the delta was 81,755.31. So we told the board, that's why we said to the Board of Education, go back and take $82,000 out of your budget, which they did. Next slide. Board of Selectmen came back and they did lower their overtime budget a little bit. So it's 306,856. It's still 6% technically, but it was reduced by, I think, $20,000, Bob, or 15, something like that. 25,000. Capital did not get touched. Board of Education came back with an increase of 270,834, which is only 1.79%. Part of that was central office had gone through their budgets and they found out there had been an error in their original calculation. It saved a lot of money, and that could have done it right then and there, but the Board of Education still required them to cut $82,000 out of their budget that we had asked. So I thought that was pretty impressive. They could have done that and said, like, we don't need to cut anymore. They still required that cut. So additional revenue, when we thought we had 910,000, we would have ended up with a 173,504.56. We were all so psyched until Friday. We actually have, by the numbers, a $97,390.59 deficit. Not horrible. We didn't all, cry over the weekend. We just said, all right, this is not as fun as we thought it was going to be. But next slide. We've heard that from the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen, it's a great year. It's a great increase. It's not on taxpayer dollars. Those are mostly new houses that are being built. People want to live here. We made 0 cuts to the capital budget. So we were really psyched about that. Board of Education went up a mere 1.79%, and we're getting the board certified behavior analyst, the additional paraprofessionals, dedicated athletic director, and new phys ed teacher. And most importantly, as Steph said, fully funded programming. We thought we had a 170, whatever that was, surplus, but it's a deficit of, it's 96.66839. And you'd be like, what? Why is that number different? And it took me hours and hours and hours and hours of trying to figure this out. And what happened is last year at our mill rate, and I may be getting too weeds in the weeds on this for you, but basically our mill rate at 28.99 gives us an extra $722 in our finances. So you have to believe me. So this is kind of an overview. We have total expenditures of 23,255,334, 23,158,665 coming in. If we have the 28.99 mil, gives us a revenue deficit of 96,669. Outstanding debt, I just want to put that up there. That's what we owe on our our school loan and our emergency services building loans. It's down. I think I used this slide. It was like 25 million back in 2022, 23. 6.39%. That's what we spend per year as compared to the expenditures, meaning what we pay. We pay. It's all in your budget and under the debt service line. The key factor I want everyone to focus in on is our undesignated fund. Now that we got the money back from the state for the reimbursement, is $3,676,872. Now, if you compare that number to our expenditure budget, it's 15.8% of our expenditure budget. And why is that important to know? Next slide. Maybe we can like increase the. Anyway, so that 3,676,872. As Bob said, the low SIP, we took 59,816 out of it. And we took 426,153 out of it for the steep projects. That money's coming back to us in the next fiscal year. Once these projects are done, this money's coming back. You see that under our present, just go down a little bit. If at our present expenditures of this year, we have a policy, a Board of Finance policy that we don't want to exceed 17% undesignated fund to expenditures. We also don't want to be below 8.5%. On our current expenditure budget for 2023-24, we're at 16.33%. Using the expenditures for the budget that we're proposing here today, 17% would be 3.95, well, 3,953,407. If we go over that, we're outside of our policy. Well, when that low SIP money comes back and that steep money comes back, we're actually going to be at 17.7%. And as a board, our policy is, we don't want to be over 17. We're holding your money. We're holding too much of your money. So we can remove 164,203 from undesignated to keep at 17%. So that's the good news. And the even better news is Bob talked about the fact that our tax collector has not only got the $100,000 in back taxes, she's got $217,000 more in back taxes. That money goes into the undesignated fund because it was only budgeted at 100. We had no snow. We had 2 months without a director of finance and administration. We didn't have a town planner for 8 months, 10 months. So we have a lot of savings that's all going to go back into our undesignated fund. We're not even projecting that. We know that this money's coming back. So I feel like we're going to be well over the 17% threshold by the summertime and certainly by the fall. But I'm proposing, and the Board of Finance has voted this evening. Just go to the next slide. So this is the dun 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 moment I had last Friday. This is a spreadsheet that Christine Diaz had that I saved in, Bob's going to take all the blame for this, but when these budgets were first projected, I probably should have looked at this and gone in there and said, hey, 18,059,785, Bob, is 100% collection rate. So it's not just on him. I could take some blame too. But when I got up this, I did this because I wanted to use the mill rate little number there. You can adjust that and it does things to the bottom line. So when I put this up and I was like, oh shoot, we have 18 million as 100% collection. That's when Bob and I had talked and realized that if we go with the 98.5, we went from 173 or 174 of a surplus to a 96,668.39 deficit. So next slide. what I can do is you see there, I think it says to or from the undesignated fund. It's kind of in the middle. If I add that 165,000 into there, which means we're taking 165 from the undesignated fund, it changes that bottom line variance to something like $103,000 in the positive, which we don't want to do that. So you lower the mill rate little by little to see where you can come out with just a minor give back to the undesignated fund. So at 0.0288, so it's 28.88 mils. That's down 0.11 from where we are. We have 833.23 goes back. And we're covered. The shortfall is covered and we all get a mill rate decrease. And that's the vote that we voted down that tonight. And that's what we're proposing to do. With that, we'll take public comment. It can be, I'm going to sit back down, but if you have a comment for Bob or Stephanie, yep, go ahead, Nick. Nick?
I've only been to 41 budget meetings. And this is one of the best I've ever seen. And I see that the town and the general government is working together, which is a new view. And I'm going to make a different thought for you to consider. Please don't raise or change the mill rate. Okay. You have some excess funds, but you have a bill coming up for the library of $2 million. I would rather see you go at the same mill rate, which will give you more money, because what would be the total cost of financing $2 million for the next 10 years? You could probably squirrel away enough to make a big dent in that $2 million. And I'm going on the anticipation that it's going to be approved, the township. I was a member of the Council of Small Towns, which organized the STEEP grant. I was on the board of directors for many years, president for 3 years. And it specifically was written, unless it's changed, only for general government. And I question, unless you use some word engineering to get it through the review board up there, you're going to put it on a school property, and you're going to have to include a lot of the recreation extracurricular activities that go on. And even then, it'll be only marginal. But if
We
you
own that
squirreled
property.
away the money, like I said, you put a big dent in the debt service and you'll save, how much is $2 million and what interest rate you think you'd get on it now?
I'm waiting for the presentation just like you are. I have no idea.
Okay. But I'd ask you to look and consider that, because I think the town has turned the corner. I commend the Board of Selectmen on their last quarterly on the comments about why it's such a nice town to live in. It is, we're extraordinary. As far as the library goes, on the Council of Small Towns, we used to hold the Board of Directors meeting at different towns. I dare you to find another town that's got a library like ours, which also has the different programs and the extracurricular activities. So I want to put a plug in for that $2 million right up front. Okay? But I caution you, if you save the amount of money that we pay for interest and debt service, it'll make your Board of Finance, maybe you'll get more years like this. That's all I got.
Thank you, Nick. Ann? Just so
Okay, hope
we're,
you can hear
we
me.
have, this is online, so if you could just, again, say your name and where you live, that'd
Okay.
be great.
And Norwalk, Northwest Corner Road again. I've heard so many numbers, I'm totally fogged in. I have no idea where you've gone up or down, but I guess it sounds good. I haven't heard anything in the school about arts and music. All I heard was sports. And lately I've been reading and hearing in the press and all about how important these sort of extras, they seem like extras, but they're enriching. They make the kid have fun at school instead of you're trying to push stuff into them. And I hope they're being covered in what you're talking about here. Thank you.
I'll let Steph answer that.
So I probably should have kept some of those good news slides in. And we totally agree with you, and we have some wonderful programs. Our elementary school drama program, our high school drama program, the music programs are really spectacular. So in an effort to support those, our non-lapsing account has purchased a new stage curtain for the high school because it was really, really old and ripped. A stage ramp to help move equipment for the stage on and off, sound shells for the high school to make sure that their sound was appropriate. We just bought a new kiln for the art department for their pottery classes. We got stage lighting for the elementary school. Oh, it's fully staffed. We have stipends for our elementary school drama program, our high school drama program. We have band teacher, chorus teacher, music teacher. We have all of those people. We're really proud of those programs. We do.
Bill?
Bill Ricker, Wyassup Road. I think both presentations were extremely well done, and I want to compliment you, Stephanie and Mike, for, at least for me, a very understandable presentation. The one question I have is, I don't know what the BCBA is, $88,000, I think. Could I have a little bit of an explanation of what the role and function of that position would be?
That's a really good question. If you look in the narrative of your, the Board of Education budget, you'll see on page 12, there's a little description about it. So the BCBA has a high level of education and experience in developing behavior intervention plans for students, and they're required to supervise those RBTs, those registered behavioral technicians that we talked about. The combination of the in-house RBTs and the BCBA will allow us to better support students in both schools while resulting in huge cost savings. The alternative education program, while often separate from the BCBA and the RBTs, may overlap at times as we respond to changing student needs.
Here's, Bill,
The board certified behavior analyst.
basically, when we got the presentation on the budget from Troy, these behaviorists, we're paying for this already. We're paying for it with outside services that come in to do this kind of behavioral analysis. And after COVID, things were not very good, and they're still rough. And our district was outsourcing this type of service at a higher rate than what we're gonna pay for somebody in-house. So that's why it made sense for us to listen to what the superintendent was asking for and what the Board of Education put forth. Because it made sense to have that person. When I first heard, I was like, what are we got in another position? But when I found out we were paying more, Stephanie, you correct me if I'm wrong, we were paying more for those services outside than we will be having that person, including the increased training for the paras who do all the, I'm not a religious person, but they do God's work in these schools, these paraprofessionals. And it's worth the money because we're gonna be saving money.
So I probably should have stressed that as well, that these are services that we currently offer, but this is going to provide some consistency. These are going to be the same people in our schools providing the service every day, rather than who we can get from the company that we were outsourcing with. We also can't have these registered behavioral technicians without having this board certified behavior analyst. And what's happening is that we are sometimes asking our paraprofessionals to handle behavioral issues that they're not necessarily trained to do. And so this is going to provide an opportunity for the paraprofessionals who want to be certified to be an RBT, to get that certification, to get an additional stipend, and to have that training and feel comfortable in those situations. So we need that BCBA to have RBTs.
And we have an alternative program over here for children with special needs that we were outsourcing and spending a lot more money on. Then we're doing it in-house. It's saving money in the end. Although we do have to use facilities. Any other comments? Harlan?
High Pendleton Hill Road. So I thought all three presentations were really great. This is my first Board of Finance meeting. I am not a North Stonington native. I'm a transplant from Norwich. And so thank you for having me, but I've never done anything on the Finance Committee and I've never done anything with the Board of Selectmen. However, I was on the Board of Ed in Norwich for 3 terms. And so I appreciate how difficult it is to come up with the Board of Education budget. And I just want to say, well done. It looked really good. And I also want to say, one of the reasons we moved here was because of the school system. And my son has a learning disability. He is going to graduate this year. You wouldn't know he had a learning disability anymore because of the school system. And so it means a lot to me to the special education department means a lot to me because of what they've done for my child. And you can't quantify that on some silly spreadsheet. And that is something that you can only see when you're at home every day and you're at a 4-H fair and your child isn't doing what you want to do, and you go to the school and you have a meeting a couple months later and they tell you he has this, learning disability, you go, holy crap, he's not lazy. He just didn't understand what I was saying. And it was a real eureka moment for Dad, let me tell you. So I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I just wanted to put my support in the school.
Harlan's son and my daughter were in preschool together. And she's graduating this year as well. Carolyn?
Carolyn Howell.
And check that.
Okay, Carolyn Howell, 495 Providence, New London Turnpike. I just wanted to say, or echo that, the presentations were very easy to understand, and I appreciate all of the transparency and all of the hard work that goes into all of this, and thank you. It's nice to see how well you all are working together, and bravo. Thank you. Great.
Thanks, Carolyn. Jonna?
You mentioned,
And you,
you mentioned there was $49,000.
That's right. Slap this in.
Right, you're killing me. So there was 49,000 in the non-lapsing account that the school placed in this year or last year? Does the school have a policy like the finance committee does with respect to how much money can be in that non-lapsing account? And why does the school get to have a non-lapsing account? Why doesn't it automatically go back to the town, Board of Ed or finance department? Those are my questions.
Can I share your microphone?
Sure.
So a really reasonable question. In terms of where it came from, so for years we didn't have one. And what was happening is when we would have a significant project that we knew about. So for example, the stage curtain that we bought, I mean, I guess significant, I don't know, but it was around $10,000. So it's a lot. We would have to figure out a way to fund that in our budget, which would grow our bottom line. And I think people know by now that that number never gets smaller, right? It only stays the same or gets bigger. So we weren't able to do long-range planning. Additionally, we would go nuts at the end of the year when school was done before the close of the fiscal year to try and spend all the money that was left in a way that made sense. But there was no way for us to have a real solid plan because we never knew what that money would be until the end of the year. And then we had until June 30th to decide what to do with it. And so there was no real long-range plan and it didn't make a ton of sense. So a long time ago, I think we started talking to the Board of Finance about this thing that's called a non-lapsing account, and it's utilized in a number of schools in Connecticut. I don't know if other people do, but here in Connecticut, it's in our statute that we can do it. So we worked for a long time together to figure out a way that we could have one here. We have a memorandum of understanding now with the Board of Finance. And while we don't have a cap on the amount, the total amount, the cap is that we don't put more than 2% of the total budget into that account. So we couldn't overinflate the budget just to have a huge number at the end to dump it in. And so that's why I wanted you to know what last year's number was, because it's not a huge number. And so every month when we do our financials, we do a non-lapsing sheet as well, so that you can see what the current balance is, what's being considered, what's being approved. The Board of Finance now reviews that every month as well. It's new and it has taken a long time for us all to sort of feel comfortable with how we're using it. At first, we really struggled with what we were going to use it for, what were we spending for, that sort of stuff. And so as the Board of Education has gotten more comfortable making decisions about what we should be paying out of that non-lapsing account and had a long-range plan with it, I think the Board of Finance has become more comfortable with the way that we're using it. So if you go back and listen to meetings, you'll hear constant talk about this non-lapsing account. But I understand to the public, it really is only a few years old and it'll take a while before people feel comfortable with it. But I think in terms of fiscal responsibility, this has really made a huge difference. Right now, I don't have that paper with me, but I think that we're about $250,000, maybe 259. Oh, explain why? So during the COVID years, that was the inception of this account, and there were huge deposits made. There were $200,000 made one year because of the overages because of COVID. So the first 2 years of deposits looked very, very strange, and it grew that balance. And that's why we've worked so hard to prioritize what we need to get done. We shored up a lot of just things that were value engineered out of our school building project. So we had to put in gates. We need to fix the field. That's what that STEEP grant's being used for. We're working on some security system stuff. We just paid for wiring for additional cameras because we don't have enough cameras in the school. I think we're likely going to put up those bollards in front of the school so the car couldn't run into the school. That sort of stuff we've been spending money on. We paid our technology budget, bought our computers last year out of it, that sort of stuff. So we did start with these unusually large deposits, but I think we're going to be seeing closer to what we saw last year. This year, we're projected to be, if they can make a projection at this stage in the game, about $30,000. So much different than the first deposits. That's true. I mean, our capital requests look different than the towns. The town's asking for things like fire trucks, and we talk about the need for smart boards. And so we don't have any because they look different, and we're able, for the most part, to fund those educational needs out of this account. I think that because of that, the Board of Finance and the town have been looking more critically at the idea of maintaining those buildings and how will we continue to do that? And while the non-lapsing account is great, if we can't count on a certain amount in there, we want to make sure that we can maintain those buildings appropriately. So we've been working really hard to sort of define that sort of stuff. And right now we just have a really wonderful working relationship amongst the boards. And so we're able to have those difficult conversations, and I'm confident that we're going to figure it all out. Thank you.
And John, just here, I mean, since that inception of that account, and the fact that the COVID years created such a big surplus in there, the Board of Finance members have, looked at that account several times and have questioned the Board of Education on what their plan is. So there's pressure from our side to them to say, listen, we're not trying to make decisions for them, but there certainly is incentive on our side to get them to use the money for stuff.
As well I should. I know the superintendent, one time he made it seem like it was the school's money. It's not the school's money. It's like the taxpayers' money. Yeah. So I'm just very cognizant of that.
Which superintendent was that?
This current one. Yeah.
Well, the money only can go to education. It can't go to anything else.
I
It
understand
is
that.
our taxpayers' money,
Right.
but it's for educational purposes.
Sure. And sure. Yeah. Oh, and a question for Bob. I've mentioned this to you before, Joe Courtney, I get his newsletters like every week. And there are those federal grants that I see every town in the eastern part of Connecticut get funding for. And it could be the police services, fire services, all sorts of grants. And I just don't understand Stonington. So it's not just based on demographics and economics. I don't understand why we've never been able to secure something with him around that.
So you're right, and we don't have the kind of staff that Stonington has. If you look at some of the small towns, they do a lot of our grant writing through the COG, Council of Governments. We're working on an EMPG grant right now. We have the STEEP grant is a grant. We do what we can when it comes to grants, but sometimes it's overwhelming. And it's funny that most of the grants, I just said this at the COG meeting last week, most of the grant opportunities come out in the middle of budget season. So what do we, the handful of people we have are working on budget seasons, and we don't have time to do grant work. We'd like to be able to do more grant work, but we can't. So we do what we can. I know what you're talking about, John, and I see, well, why did Preston get a fire truck? Why did someone else get some other equipment? So something we're concentrating on, we're working on getting better at. I'm hoping with Laura on board that the past admin finance director did not do grants. We're hoping that we get more involved with grants. We're going to be meeting with there's some road grants coming through the COG that they're working on. It's Safe Street grants. We're looking at those. So it's not that we don't want to do, we just don't have the manpower hours sometimes to get them done. Now, if you write grants, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that, because I could use some help, but I appreciate where you're coming from. It's frustrating. And I give Sandra Gorthia, she's the first selectman of Preston, like, how do you get so many damn grants? So why don't you just quit there and come work for us? Right? But she's the first selectman, so she's not going to do that. But yeah, Preston's very impressive, but not when you look at Bosworth, Volantown, and Sterling, we're all in the same boat. We just man hours and trying to get it done. I know the fire company is trying to work harder now and trying to get a grant writing for their needs. We told them we'd be willing to help work with them. I know Susan Pike, our county generalist, is working on one now. The EMP grant is for emergency services, so you don't always see them, but we do work on them. but we don't have the big ones in the paper, I guess. Thank you.
We have, Brian, give me a second. Is there anyone online? Is there any people online who want to comment? Any hands? No. All right, Brian, round two. What's your name? Where you're from?
Ryan Rathbun, 263 Grindstone Hill Road. Just a few things I wanted to point out is, I know you keep saying it's a savings that the school found, but it was a mistake. It makes me wonder, any other mistakes around? Not only with the Board of Education, but any of the boards. The other thing is, when they need, when they're gonna have contracts with different people, there's all, I keep going back to the benefits, because benefits add quite a lot to a person's wages. Medical benefits, I know a few years back was big contention. They started taking away dental. They started negotiating, I should say, not taking away. They had to negotiate those things. People had to pay a little bit more for their medical. The other thing I keep hearing is, and I know I do it with my budget when I look at it, I want a new truck. Do I need a new truck? And I keep hearing that all the time. We need this. No, you want this. It's not necessary or need. And the only other thing I'd like to find out is, are the budgets going to be voted on separately?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I got for tonight. I won't hold you up anymore. Thank you.
Well, I mean, the capital budget, it's not that someone wants a new truck. These are items that we've been denying for years and years and years. And this is the reason why we asked the Board of Selectmen to come up with a comprehensive plan, and that we do have that for this year, and we are not cutting it. And we have the capital committee that's going to be looking at the needs of the town for next year and years to come, and to try to find a way that we're going to be able to fund this stuff, whether by bonds or increases, or however we're going to do it. You know, and we'll be able to see, project out what are these going to happen with the budget. And every year we're going to look at that capital, and as long as I'm on this board and my fellow board members are here, we start with that and we tell the Board of Selectmen, you got work to do because we're not touching this. We tell the Board of Education, you got work to do because we're not touching this. So that's the way we're going forward. Go ahead, Brian.
Wasn't saying anything about the capital plan. I think a capital plan has been needed for years. And I hope we stick to it. No,
Yeah.
I support that 100% what you've done there.
Comment so everyone could hear it. Brian said he approves of the capital plan. So pretty much sure that it's documented. We got it in writing. Any other comment? We'd love to hear from you guys if you have. Obviously, we're going to have a public meeting. We'll have time to talk about it then, but if you want changes or you think that you know, what we're proposing is not what you want to see, speak now or forever hold your peace. We're meeting Wednesday. We're meeting Wednesday to determine whether, what we're going to do, if anything, with these budgets. So go ahead, Bill.
Bill Ricker again, Wyasip Road. There's certainly differences of opinion on the land acquisition fund. The Conservation Commission has been asking for money to be put in that land acquisition fund for many years. It was at $20,000 when I started on the Conservation Commission, and it went down to $1. It went back up to 1,000. What is it now? Is it at 0 again?
I think it's $1.
I know there's a difference of opinion. There are those that think if you put money into this land acquisition fund, it just sits there in the bank and does nothing. But what the land acquisition fund does do is allow our public to purchase a piece of land that the town may need, whether it be for education or recreation or conservation, and not dip into the budget on that particular year. We had money in that budget when we purchased the Hewitt Farm. Not all of Hewitt Farm obviously was purchased with that money, but a good bit of it. And that has become quite an asset to the town, to the public, and for their recreation. So I'm disappointed once again that the Board of Finance has not seen clear to support that land acquisition fund. And when you say, speak now or forever hold your peace, I'm speaking now, and I will speak again for it next year.
Appreciate that, Bill. The good news is that we have a really solid undesignated fund. If I wasn't clear before, and should there be an amazing piece of property that the town wants, we certainly come to us for an appropriation request, and it will not be turned a blind eye to. We would listen to whatever you have to say, and if necessary, if appropriate, we'll send it to the town for a vote. I think that's the process that, we got to use at this point. And the Board of Selectmen did not have that in their budget, so. Yes, Nick. Gary, can you motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a second? All those in favor? Aye.